Welcome to the Skill Talks Disrupt podcast, where we dive into the world of innovation and technology. My name is Malika, and I'm the founder of Skill Talks, which is a digital and tech recruitment company that operates across the globe. Today, I have with me Zack Dugow, who is the founder and CEO of Insticator. We're going to be discussing a bit more about the consolidations that have been happening within the Adtech and Martech industry very recently. So over to you, Zack. I'd love to find out a bit more about you, your background, and more details around Instigator.
Yeah, great to be here, Malika. Thanks for having me on. So it's to meet you. So I'm founder and CEO of Insticator and also CEO of Balihoo and OKO Digital, which is based right in the UK, right near you, actually. I think about 30 minutes from where you are currently. And so I'll tell you a bit about what we do. We're really an engagement-based business, and it touches multiple elements of engagement, from brands and publishers to end users. And so our Insticator business, we focus on building community. We see the future of social and social interaction as being distributed instead of siloed in the walled gardens, where publishers nowadays, or have been historically, very reliant on Meta for traffic or Apple News for traffic. And they're seeing that being cut off, and in addition to that, when publishers would have users on Meta and on Apple, they would make very little monetization, if any. And it was very difficult for them to understand when that traffic was coming, have predictability. And so instead, we take a lot of that social interaction and we bring it to live on the publishing site. Hey, these are your users, your data that you own. Cookies are going away. You identifying these users is even more valuable than ever. And we build these community features through engagement. And so essentially, users can engage in trivia, in polling, in content recirculation native to that specific site. They can engage in commenting, where they can flag and comment and react and message with other users and really build this community on a specific site itself. So if you're talking about traveling, you don't need to have half of your audience living on Meta. You can have your full audience living inside of your publishing site and build that community that way, which allows you as a business to make a lot more money and to have an overall better user experience. And so that's really how we focus our Insticator business. Then separate, we have our OKO Digital business, which allows us to drive monetization for all of the publishers that we work with. We have our own supply side platform and our own video monetization, as well as our own what we call full ad management, where for publishers, we can manage their entire ad stack. So all of their monetization end to end, and take kind of that outsourced ad ops work away from them and help them drive more revenue. And also we do a lot of CTV monetization, which is a fast growing part of our business. And so recently we just acquired a company called Balihoo. And Balihoo is a SaaS platform for brands, where for any multi-location retailer or franchise brand that typically has more than 30 locations, we localize all of their ad campaigns through Google, through search, through social, through display, so that every store and location that you have can have its own custom creative and its own custom landing page. So if you're in England, and let's say that there's 5 different Kohler stores in England, you want to show an ad creative for the store that's closest to that end user. And with custom messaging, say you've got 20% off of lawn chairs at this location and 30% off of Bath and Body Works at this location, you can have custom messaging, and we break out all of the media spend to a specific store location level. So it allows you to have these custom, our Balihoo technology allows you to have these custom messaging and custom landing pages for each location across 1,500 stores. And our technology automates this within hours instead of what would normally take people manually months or days, weeks, and months to try to manually update for creatives. Imagine doing that for 1,500 stores. We break all of these things out and spend, and then we do it even more effectively than typically what brands are able to do on their own or with their other partners. And so we partner with a lot of brands directly, like Kohler or Pearl Vision or National Veterinary Association, as well as other agencies like to partner with us and utilize our products and our technology. And so by bringing Balihoo into the mix with OKO and Insticator, we're able to really merge together a lot of really important data and bring to our publishers increased brand dollars from a lot of campaigns, and bring to our brands a lot of increased exposure to different users at a lower price point. It's kind of an everybody wins, because we're taking out a lot of the middle layer where typically there's a lot of margin taken from multiple DSPs and SSPs on auction specifically. And I think that is really necessary for thriving for businesses in our industry and for surviving, frankly, as well. So in the past, you've typically had companies that have been very either supply side focused, so focused on the publisher. You have companies that have been very focused on the brand or the agency, if you will. And now, in order to really succeed, I believe you really need to have actually both of those constituents as well as the user. And that's really where we thrive, especially at Insticator. We're providing really engaging experiences for the end user as well. So they're having a better experience while they're being monetized and enjoying great content from a publisher. But the industry is consolidating that. You can't really, I think, survive and thrive or win if you only have relationships with brands or if you only have relationships with publishers. It's why you're going to continue to see a lot of this consolidation of the middle, where you have companies like the Trade Desk creating their open path initiatives to work directly with publishers. Companies like Magnite and PubMatic are creating their own DSP initiatives, either one that they acquired or one that they've built in homegrown, because you really need to own it end to end. And you're going to see that consolidation. I think you're going to see either a lot of M&A activity or you're going to see companies that don't adjust and adapt that will probably go away, frankly, because you're just going to see their business and their margins kind of taking an ongoing hit. It'll be more and more difficult for them to survive and thrive, especially when you consider there's a lot of economic headwinds still happening that we may be coming out of soon. Hopefully. But when you factor that in as well, it kind of exacerbates the issue.
Yeah. What are you kind of seeing? Can you provide some insight into what you think you're seeing in terms of the industry consolidation within Martech and Adtech? How are you kind of seeing the likes of DSPs or even publishers being affected by this right now? I know you touched up on that, but if you can go into more detail, it'd be great.
Yeah. So you have people like MediaMath, who went bankrupt recently, and other companies like IMDS, both of whom have been bought out of bankruptcy and kind of really bolster effectively their new parent companies. I think you're going to see more and more of that. Again, I think you're going to see vertically integrated solutions within the next 2 to 3 years that service everything that a publisher needs and that a brand needs. And that is quite difficult to nail. It's why we acquired Balihoo, is because we had a team now of experts and amazing technology. And what blew us away was that customers have 5-to-1, 6-to-1, 7-to-1 return on ad spend, which is amazing numbers for these brands. The product really works and works well. And we have this amazing team of experts, a lot of whom are in Boise, Idaho. But you're going to see that if you don't have that level of expertise or that competitive technology edge, I think you're going to start to see those businesses being very, very heavily hampered and hurt, certainly over the next 2 years, because there is still so much change happening. And then when you pull into the fact regulatory change as well, it makes it even more difficult if you have to partner with totally separate entities. It just makes a lot more sense for a lot of reasons to have this consolidation of, if you will, of the middle, and have just these kind of vertically integrated solutions across the board. I mean, it's we don't talk about it like that, but it's what's made in part Google so successful for so many years. We don't think about them as vertically integrated because typically if somebody's been on the supply side, they're working with their AdX team or their demand side team at DV360. They're so vertically integrated that that's allowed them to have so much success. I mean, they see everything. And of course they say, there's a wall and nobody talks between the two sides of the marketplace. I find that hard to believe. Call me a skeptic. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting time in this market because even just outside of, our industry, ad tech at the moment, if you compare it to 2021, where we saw, a lot of funding and a lot of investment being put into companies. Again, I feel like it's starting to pick up a little bit more now, but there's definitely, not as much investment activity, going on this year compared to previous years. Where are you kind of seeing that going right now, and what are your thoughts in terms of the state where we're in right now?
Yeah, I just want to make sure. Like, are you getting any feedback? Should I put my headphones in, or you can hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me
Okay,
clearly?
perfect. Yes, I can. I just want to make
Okay,
sure
good.
that here, I'll put these in just to be safe.
Yeah, no, I can hear you absolutely fine.
All right. All right, perfect. So, yeah, you've seen, I think, over the last 6 to 9 months, a very big, heavy slowdown in funding
Yeah.
in the ad tech, martech ecosystem. Part of that is increasing of interest rates.
Hmm.
And look, just to explain for people why that's so important and why that matters so much, is typically if you've got VC funded companies, and I'll explain what a VC funded company looks like, and then what a private equity company looks like, private equity funded company looks like. A VC funded company typically needs to be growing at over 100% a year. Now, that's good. Great really looks like growing at 200% a year and having a net revenue retention of 120, meaning for every year, let's say your customer makes $100 last year, that same customer is making 120 this coming year.
Right.
So there's very small number of companies that fall into that VC funded bucket, just anyways, period. Because you need to be doubling in size each year. If your business is growing 40% a year, that's great, but that doesn't really fit into the VC model. And with valuations having been so high and coming down, VCs have had to been very cautious because they made a lot of bad bets in 2021 and paid really high prices, which have significantly hurt their own LPs, which are their investors. Then if you take private equity companies, private equity funds, when they buy or they invest in a company in a majority deal, if you will, let's say they're buying a company for $100 million or they're investing $100 million into a business. They're not putting $100 million in cash into that business. Typically, they're taking $50 million in debt from a lender and they're putting in $50 million. Certainly, if that company has EBITDA to support this, that's typically what they're doing. So what that could mean in that example is that if interest rates, for example, for those companies are at 10% instead of 15%, that's like an extra $2.5 million in debt service. So interest rates play a big hand in how the private equity business works, and that plays into the funding markets. And so it's why I think you saw a lot of these bankruptcies. It's why companies like IMDS and MediaMath, who were either, IMDS was public through its other shell company or MediaMath was private equity owned, had real problems because they couldn't restructure their debt for lower interest rate debt. Their bills became higher and higher. And when you have debt as a business, it's not a scenario where it's like, okay, if you have $50 million in debt, it's not like, oh, well, if we can just cut our monthly costs, we're okay. The banks then have to still be paid, or the lenders still need to be paid on that debt. And when you take into account that, 6 months ago, First Republic Bank, I don't know if any big banks went bust in the UK. First Republic and Signature and others went bankrupt because they had, too much long-term exposure. We don't need to dig into that part. It made banks even more cautious. And so all of that being said, to say very simply, funding has been slow the last 9 months. I do think you're going to see some slight increase happening over the next 6 to 12 months if the markets, like the economy and the ad tech market, start to recover. You'll start to see activity again because those funds have a lot of dry powder. So they have a lot of cash on the sidelines. And remember, if you're a VC fund or you're a private equity fund, you only make money if you deploy it. If you just hold on to it, that hurts your internal rate of return. It hurts your fund's performance ultimately. Now, granted, for them, a no bet is better than a bad bet, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I mean, you've done quite a lot in terms of your investment in your businesses. In this year, you've obviously acquired a couple of companies. You've done this during almost what we consider a downturn. So, I suppose my question to you is, what are kind of maybe the reasons behind that, and maybe how can you perhaps advise other companies out there in terms of like how can this kind of investment activity perhaps lead to successful outcomes for companies. Just would be keen to find out a bit more about your reasonings behind doing it during this time and why you've maybe made your bets this time round.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of subscribe to the old Warren Buffett adage, which is I am greedy when people are fearful, and I am fearful when people are
Yeah,
greedy. So the best time
that's
to
very
buy
true.
companies is when the markets are down. So you get a way lower price
Yeah.
point. So if you've got a long-term horizon like we do at Insticator, OKO, and Ballyhoo, you're looking at, okay, how are we maximizing value over the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years plus? And markets will always recover. But so when people are nervous and the markets have turned negatively, that's when there's the biggest opportunities. I mean, lots of the greatest
Hmm.
companies were launched during recessions, if you will. And for us, this is a great time because we are a healthy company, we're a profitable and growing business. We can take advantage of this fracture in the marketplace and really have that look to benefit us. The time when I feel like you shouldn't be buying and expanding is when the markets are insanely frothy and valuations are at all-time highs and you're paying crazy multiples on things that don't make sense. Um, I think that's when, it's kind of it's so interesting. It's just like human behavior, right? When
It
everybody's
is.
happy and everything's going great, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so great. It's
Yeah.
never going to be
Let's invest
bad.
in
Like, let's just
Bitcoin.
we better get in now, right?" It's like so many
Yeah.
people wanted to buy Bitcoin at 60,000, not as many want to buy it at 25,000. It's just this, it's such interesting human behavior. It follows the same things, whether it's businesses or it's real estate or it's crypto. It's that same thing. So when markets are down, times like this, I think, is a great time to be very active.
Yeah. Totally agree. And yeah, it is weird. I mean, even when the time when like Bitcoin was happening, everyone was like buying, it was going up and down so fast. And now everyone's just like, okay, I'm not even like touching that now. I think it's going to be dead. But it, it's just weird
Right,
how our minds
exactly.
work now. I think all of us are just in fear right now. And I just think at the moment, everyone's just holding on tight just to see what happens. But actually, like you said, this is probably the time where you can, get some bargains, I suppose, in the market.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times also companies, not just there, but like the first thing they cut is their marketing budget. But
Yeah.
it's like if you have an effective marketing strategy, if you have an effective marketing strategy, the best time to kind of pick up market share is times when the market is down. That's the
Hmm.
best time because that's where you're going to see a lot of those opportunities where your competitors are going to be sleeping or they're going to be overly cautious. It's kind of like sort of like you almost wish you could flip it, right? When
Yeah.
things are going really well, be super cautious, right? Like it's like if you could have a toggle for people's brains, it's like we're going to change, we're just going to do a 180. Things are going so well, we're going to make everybody super cautious. Things are going really bad, we're going to make them super aggressive. That would serve people so much better than like the natural human instinct.
Exactly. No, that's really true. So tell us a bit more about your recent acquisitions. I know you talked a bit more about the product offerings on each of
Yeah.
those, but what does that sort of mean for your company and sort of the future direction and what you're taking the lead on?
Absolutely. So it means for us, for our publishers that are utilizing kind of our engagement products, our commenting units and our content engagement units with trivia and polling, they're going to have a lot of higher CPMs because they're going to have these direct campaigns flowing from our Ballyhoo side of our business and our managed service side of our business into their pipe. So it's going to make them more money. So that's good for them and good for us because when we have happier customers as well. It also helps us because on our value side of our business, we can get them exposure to users at a way cheaper price point that they need to be in front of for all of their brands. So it's kind of like a two-way win, if you will. So that kind of really helps bolster the side of our value business as well. And then for us, we are hiring, kind of growing significantly on our OKO and our Balihoo and our Insticator sides of our business. But because the product and the offering is now stronger because it has those direct ad dollars and budgets kind of being bolstered into it. So it always takes time to integrate post an acquisition, but I think we're already starting to see a lot of those dividends. And we've been so blessed that we have such a great team that we've been able to acquire.
Oh,
That's not
nice.
always the story. A lot of times there's a lot of cultural challenges, and I don't think people talk about that enough when you're doing an acquisition, how important it is to try to merge the cultures or before you acquire, be aware of how are decisions made at this business? How does the culture really flow at this company? And how does that align to our own culture and
Mm,
values do those things align, or is that going to require effort and energy? I think been really fortunate that the team Ballyhoo's got, really blended super well with our culture, and they've
Oh,
got
that's
great values, and
good.
that's been able to fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think like when these things
So
happen, I think people just fear about, oh gosh, what's going to happen to our jobs? Like, oh, is this going to be more corporate? Like, I think that's what people tend to worry about. It's the first thing they think about when an acquisition is going to happen or a merger.
it's kind of the same thing on the human behavior side, right? Like
Yeah,
unknown is always embraced with fear. It's not as often embraced with like, oh my gosh, this could be wonderful. And I was catching up with one of our other Ballyhoo team members. We'd acquired 3 or 4 months ago, the company just about 3 months ago. And they're so happy because things are so much better here than when they were beforehand in their prior setup. And so I think that's something that people should remember in business, but in general, with anything in change, right? That it's always naturally, I think, scary for people,
yeah.
but oftentimes it can end up even better than whatever your prior setup was in life and or in business.
So how have you guys navigated and managed to, again, it's obviously obvious what you've just said, culture is really important when these things happen, when acquisitions occur. So what have you and your team been focused on to ensure that there is some, the culture and the values of the business are still intact? So have you kind of developed new ones? Like how have you kind of navigated all around this, especially because some of your teams are sort of away from New York City, aren't they?
Yeah, we're fully remote now, so our teams are super distributed. So we've got
Okay.
team members all over New York, Boise, Idaho,
Oh,
Canada,
wow. Okay.
Waterloo, Toronto, India, Bangalore, Udaipur. We've got team members in the UK and South America. I mean, all over the globe. And so being a remote company, I think is, there's a lot of pros to it. There's some challenges as well, right? It's harder to read emotion through a Zoom call
Yeah.
than if you're sitting in a room with somebody. So we do try to make that happen, at least with our leadership team, on kind of like a quarterly basis, if you will. In terms of culture, I think a couple things. One is, went out to visit the team in person before the acquisition so they could kind of see me, get to know me, as well as another member of our team, and how that part's really important is like whatever FaceTime you can do in the beginning is really important. I think it is
Definitely.
shows also if you're willing to travel to go and meet those team members, hey, this means something to us. And then separately, I think having really open lines of communication and one-on-ones, and everybody's going to watch very closely what you do if you're a leader and how you operate. And they're going to kind of, it's something, it's hard to remember, right? So it's kind of like at Instigator, we've been in business now 11 years. And so we have some team members, like our CTO has been with us for like 10 years. And what'll happen is sometimes is you'll forget like, oh, some people have been with the company for 5 years. They know what I mean when I say this word versus somebody's brand new. And that could mean something totally different. Actually, I have a very funny story if you'd like.
Yeah, go for it.
So, and this is a good one because it's UK, US American, merging story. So we, before COVID, we had this beautiful office at 2 Park Ave. So 32nd and Park Ave. Our neighbor was this company JW Player in our space. And
Yeah.
on the 7th floor was the trade desk. So we're going through we're going through the acquisition, and somebody made a comment. So just so you understand, we used to have an office parakeet. So like a mini parrot,
Oh,
really
wow.
cute
That's
name.
so funny.
Yeah, we did. And she was awesome. Anyways, so I'm telling this, like, I'm just talking about something and I'm telling some story, and I make a reference to one of our team members. And I said, oh, yeah, such and such has like a bird on their arm. And our team in the UK was like looking at themselves thinking, did he just say that? Like,
Yeah,
meaning,
that bird means like a girl.
right, exactly. But I meant, oh no, like an actual bird was on his arm. So it was very funny because it didn't even come out just then. It came out like a month or two later when they realized that. But it was just like a very, very funny story because you forget, like, words have different meaning in different places of the world. So,
Definitely. I
anyways.
mean, when I lived in the States, I didn't lose my accent or anything like that, but even so, I'd still say the odd things and people would look at me like, hang on, what are you on about? or like it may have come across like really direct, or even just like even when I'd go and order like water, I'd have to honestly put on an accent, like no one could understand me. But even just last week, I just went for a bachelorette party. We call it a hen do here. I said like the odd things like that were very, and literally my friends would pick up on it like, that's so American what you've just said. Well, what do you mean? So yeah, it's interesting. And the thing is, with the British culture, we've got a very sarcastic culture. We're very sarcastic people. And I think the Americans are quite the opposite. But then they also have their own sarcasm as well. And for us, it can come across quite cheesy. Yeah. You've probably heard this already.
Many times, but I like hearing it though, because it's totally true. It's like you forget, right, how like sarcasm, how important that is if you're an American, and how common it is in communication.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, it makes your company more fun. At least you've got, got the culture integrated, and at least you've kind of, gone out in person, and yeah, it's all sort of working out, and very smart of you to invest in acquiring those companies, especially during a downturn.
Thank you for that, Malika. I appreciate that. We're excited for the future, excited for utilizing first-party data capturing and for other opportunities kind of coming our way. And all the credit in the world really goes to our team, who's kind of working hard day in, day out and making stuff happen. So excited for the future. And thank you for taking the time to interview me today. This was a lot of fun.
Likewise. No, really good to have you here. Thank you so much, Zach.
All right. Well, you take care, Malika.